Hi, wonderful listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the TeleWellness Hub podcast. I'm Marty Hamilton, your host, and today we get to speak with Aydrelle Collins all about sexual wellness. She is an LPC and a PhD student, is a distinguished sex therapist with a wealth of expertise in the field of human sexuality. With over 150 hours of specialized sex therapy training and a background as a trained somatic sex educator, she brings a unique and holistic approach to her practice. And as a ketamine-assisted psychotherapist, she extends her therapeutic techniques to address both the psychological and physiological aspects of sexual well-being. Welcome, Aydrelle. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, when I read your bio, and I should have mentioned your practice name is Melanin Sex Therapy. I love the name. I love the background. I like your experience, your training, the work you're doing. I'm so intrigued. I think you're really pioneering something really interesting in terms of how we can apply ketamine assisted therapy to sexual wellness and help for partners in overcoming trauma and just all the works. We got to talk a little bit before we hit record, and of course I did some research prior. So I'm just excited to have listeners get to learn more about the work you're doing. First, why don't we start by just, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about why you do the wellness work that you do.
Yeah, I think for me, why is I'm a Black woman. So hence the name of my practice, Melanin Sex Therapy. And I have found in my community, talking about sex and sexuality, those things are really taboo. And you combine that with mental health, that's even more taboo. And so I intentionally became a sex therapist because I wanted to be a face to say hey, I am a person of color. I live in the South, and I am openly talking about sex and sexuality and mental health. And I think it is important for people, not just in my community, but people in general, to see sexuality is a part of everything that we do. Sexuality is a part of life. And so the more I can create that space where people can openly talk about it, whether they are comfortable screaming vagina out at the top of their lungs, or they need some coaching on how to do that, just for people to get to a place where they are comfortable with sexuality and themselves being a sexual being. I think that is why I do the wellness work that I do.
That's amazing. I think there are so many communities, just speaking from a Hispanic community too, where, mental health, there's some stigma around that, sexuality, there's some stigma around that. And so I just love that you're fostering education, appreciation, encouragement to be a sexual being. And the reality is that we are wired this way, right? Like sexuality is part of our biology. And I love that you're bringing awareness to this area, and not just awareness, but an opportunity for people to thrive in their sexuality.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because that is definitely what it's all about for me, is thriving. I tell my clients they deserve great sex. They deserve the sex life that they want for themselves. And so to change their narrative from sex that's rooted in shame and trauma and things like that, to one that's rooted in empowerment, and it's their voice, it's their narrative of what they feel like their sexuality will be. That is some really empowering stuff. And yeah, I just want people to stand and thrive in their sexuality.
What are some things that you see come up in terms of the reasons or paths in which people end up going to see a sex therapist? So, when choosing, okay, maybe I want to go into find a therapist. What leads people to specifically find you as a sex therapist?
Yeah, so I mainly work with couples now. And so couples who are struggling to communicate with one another about sex. sex has become like this really tender topic, and like every time like it gets brought up, it turns into this space where there's frustration, where there's anger, and that causes them to just avoid being sexual altogether. So communication around sex, one partner may have like a higher sex drive than the other partner, and so that is causing some issues, and they are struggling with how to navigate that. People who are interested in possibly opening up their relationship, trying polyamory or ethical non-monogamy. That is something that I'm seeing a lot of. And then also on the individual side, because we don't get like great sex ed in this country, a lot of people are just struggling with how to talk to their partners about sex. If they are a person with a vulva and they're experiencing painful sex, a lot of that is rooted in trauma. And so working through some of those traumas that they've experienced, people with penises come to me for like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. So anything like related to sex and sexuality, that's when people tend to reach out to me.
You brought up you're from the South, and I'm in Texas.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. So I know that Texas is an abstinence only
Yeah.
sex ed state. So there is like not a lot of room for conversations about any details. Um, no. So at like what age do you typically start having clients come in? Or yeah, let's start there because then I'm also thinking from a parenting standpoint. I have younger girls, but I want them to be empowered, not feel shamed. So that'll probably be like question number two, like just kind of navigating that. But what age do you typically see people coming in?
So usually it's in like their 20s. So I the youngest person I've seen is 19. The oldest person I've seen, there were a couple in their 70s. So it really just depends. And it's funny you should say, like, I used to teach sex ed while I was in grad school. Yeah. Yeah. And I also chair the board of a nonprofit that does comprehensive sex ed for after school programs and things like that. So shout out to WISE. Um, so yeah, it is definitely because they did not receive that education, and also because we're not really taught how to talk about sex in this country. We're not taught how to talk about sex in context of a relationship. So that is where I see people struggling the most. It's just how do we have healthy, productive conversations about sex that don't lead to this spiral, that don't lead to people feeling attacked or things like that.
Obviously, I know everyone is different, but and every relationship is different. But for those people listening, what are some questions that they could like go home and take to their partners and ask to kind of get the sexual wellness journey started?
Yeah. So I always encourage my couples to just make it fun. Sex should be playful. Sex should be adventurous and curious. I love to give my couples this game called I Turn Myself On, I Turn Myself Off. And it's just a fun little way to start that conversation about sex without the expectation that you have to be sexual after, like you can if you want to, but there's no expectation. And so basically, you can start by saying, like, hey, I listened to this podcast and there was a sex therapist on there, and she recommended this game called I Turn Myself On, I Turn Myself Off. And I like the I Turn Myself On because it gives you back your power and like you take ownership of your pleasure. So I turn myself on when XYZ happens, and I turn myself off when XYZ happens versus putting that on your partner to make sure you get turned on. So just having games to play, like I like the little date night cards, the little let's get deep. That's like my favorite game to recommend to couples, and just making it fun.
And kind of like segueing just in terms of you mentioned the after school programs, and we don't always know how to talk about sex maybe with our partners. What about for parents with their kids, like any kind of just like foundational stuff? Obviously, they can even go to you or to a sex therapist, right, to kind of get guidance on how to navigate things. I'm assuming would be a wonderful empowering tool as a parent.
Yeah, of course. And like I love when I was teaching sex ed, like I love working with parents because I have a 16-year-old son. And so like I've had to have these talks like all throughout his life. And so I encourage parents to like talk to their kids early and often. So in the nonprofit that I chair, we use this curriculum. It's called Our Whole Lives, and it starts from kindergarten all the way up to elderly. So um, making it age appropriate. So if you have younger kids, teaching them proper names for their body parts, teaching them about like private areas, like what's safe touch, what's not safe touch, what's body boundaries. How do you become a good friend? Because at the core of good sex ed, it's healthy relationships. And if you have a healthy relationship, you can have a healthy sex life. And so, like, as they get older, like, of course, talking about puberty, like, boys and girls need to learn about like menstruation and things like that. And again, healthy boundaries, healthy relationships. And then as they get into like their teen years, then you can start to like have like the formal physical sex talk with them. So, talking to them about birth control, talking to them about pregnancy, again, emphasizing boundaries and healthy relationships. Um, I always like to use pop culture references. So, like, kids watch TV. So, we see like a couple in the movies having sex. Like, what did you notice? Did you notice they use protection? Like, what do you think about that? And so, just asking questions and listening. And, you don't have to know every little thing. Like, kids aren't looking for you to be like the expert on sex, but like, kids want to have these conversations with their parents. And so, just diving in, just as long as you're talking to them about it, like just having those conversations and like placing your values. But like at the end of the day, your child is going to have their own values around sex, but your values and your voice is the most important voice, whether they tell you that or not, especially when they become teenagers. But it definitely is.
I could imagine. My daughters are 9, but I love that question of what did you notice? Because that's just such a neutral opening question. Like, what did they notice? So I really like that. In terms of diving into healthy relationships, you mentioned like that's the goal, right? Healthy relationship, healthy friendships. And something that really stood out to me when I was looking at your website too is just really, it sounds like you're just fostering a really healthy relationship with yourself and your own sexuality.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. For sure.
So I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there. I'm just picturing for those who are listening and may feel like they would like a better relationship with their own sexuality, whether it's because they've experienced shame or they haven't had like the most fulfilling sexual experiences. What are some starting points that you would recommend, some insight for those people listening?
Yeah. So I like to start with mindfulness and body exploration. I love to give my clients a mindful masturbation exercise because typically when people are struggling with sex and like have had trauma around sex or just haven't had like a fulfilling relationship with sex, they usually don't tend to masturbate or they avoid masturbation or they've developed a technique of masturbation that is just like really quick and not pleasurable and like they're not really taking the time to explore their body. So I like to incorporate a lot of mindfulness in the work that I do with people and like encouraging people to slow down. And that also creates a sense of safety around sex, especially when you've experienced trauma with sex. Safety is very, very important. So, having them kind of redevelop a relationship and like, what does sexual safety look like and feel like for them? If they know that they are safe and if they feel that they are safe. So, starting with mindfulness exercise, mindful body exploration, mindful masturbation, and you can either do that solo or you can do that with a partner as well.
The mindfulness aspect. There's some people who feel like, okay, mindfulness is this thing that I don't think I'm capable of. I can't do. I don't know if you've ever received that kind of reaction. Um, I wonder if you notice any, since from your clinical experience, if you notice any difference when mindfulness is applied to sexuality compared to other areas of life. Does anything kind of stand out?
Well, I think that I get the same response is that people don't feel like they can slow their brains down. And especially when it comes to mindfulness, they equate that with meditation. And like meditation can be a part of mindfulness. And so they think they have to sit there like quiet and like in a place like they're Buddha under the Bodhi tree or something like that.
Yeah.
But mindfulness isn't that. Mindfulness is just learning how to be present in the moment and learning how to be present in your body and like really slowing down and being intentional. And so when I break it down like that, um, people really can grasp that concept of, okay, like I don't have to sit somewhere and be quiet for like 20, 30 minutes. I can start with maybe 2 minutes of just, I'm sitting in this chair. What am I noticing? What does my butt feel like in this chair? What does my feet feel like in this chair? Like all around me, like what am I noticing in my body in this moment? And like the more that they practice that, the more that they see like it's not a difficult task to do.
Yeah, so like body awareness style mindfulness techniques, just awareness that all the senses I'm imagining. Okay. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Because I think those mindfulness techniques, I'm sure, are really helpful or effective for enhancing sexual well-being with partners. Because you brought up, sometimes like if the result is the focus, or putting the responsibility on the partner and the focus there, and I would imagine what I love about mindfulness is it's very empowering. So being able to translate it kind of into an empowering opportunity within sexual wellness just sounds like it's a great opportunity for people. What about the utilization of the ketamine in a therapeutic setting for sexual wellness? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the utilization of ketamine, like I like to use it with couples who feel stuck. So that could be whether they're stuck in communication or stuck in the cycle, or like there's just some aspect of talking about sex that like they just cannot get past. And so when I've worked with couples in the past using ketamine, like I found that like after their session, like their mind tends to be a little bit more open and they tend to be a lot more present. And I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It just feels like they've overcome this block and like they are able to have those discussions openly and honestly without fear of judgment, without fear of rejection. And then, especially for the trauma piece as well, if one of the partners has experienced a sexual trauma, like working with ketamine helps them kind of get past any blocks and even helps them be more present and mindful and start to like really explore what sexual safety can look like and feel like to them.
I think there are a lot of misconceptions maybe about ketamine assisted therapy. Can you walk us through what a typical session might look like?
Yeah, yeah. So before um, they take the ketamine, they get an intro session with me, and that's where we go over like what they can expect, like how long the session's going to be, and more importantly, like what are they hoping to gain? Like what are some goals? What type of experience would they like to have on the ketamine, and just putting that mindset in place to just make sure there's not a lot of anxiety, like they're as calm and like focused as can be. And so when they come for the actual ketamine session, I do lozenge ketamine. And so they take the ketamine. It takes about like 10, 15 minutes for them to start to feel the effect. And I usually just have like soft music playing. They lay down on my couch with a weighted blanket and an eye mask. And if they want to do like some somatic exercises or some type of body touch work while they are on the ketamine, like they are welcome to do that. And I'm welcome to do that with them. Or sometimes they just want to like sit in silence or lay in silence and just like experience like the ketamine and have that experience in silence by themselves. And so after the session, usually like 2 or 3 days later, we have what's called an integration session. And so we talk about like, what was the experience like? Like, what did you notice? Like, what shifts in mindset? What blocks do you feel like you've overcome? And like, how can you apply that and in your everyday life? And like, how can you apply the same feelings and what you learn into your relationship?
I imagine that's a really powerful experience. What are some of the things you see from couples that um, either individually or in their partnership or in their relationship? What do you see afterwards that you can really point to the therapeutic work that you guys have done together?
Yeah. So, in regards to, are you talking about with the ketamine or just like therapeutic work in general?
I don't I just think like, well, I know it depends, right? Because I know you're doing therapeutic work. Sometimes it's ketamine assisted. There's mindfulness in there. You're looking at trauma. I guess just some examples. Let's talk about the ketamine because you're probably the first person I really have read about, have seen, have gotten to talk to. So I feel so privileged that has using it specifically with partners for sexual wellness. You are so. I think I'm imagining all the possibilities for ways in which their relationship is enhanced. I don't know if you ever get like testimonials from them afterwards or if they share ways in which there have been shifts in their life. Have you?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed one couple in particular. One of the partners was just really, really stuck, and like they thought they had like low libido. They thought, they just were not they were just disinterested in sex, and they were asexual, and like all of that stuff is fine. But I talked to them about ketamine, and they were interested in trying it, and they had a session. The partner with the low libido like took the ketamine, and I don't know, like they came back and we had the integration session, and they just said that they felt light, and like they felt like something had shifted, and like they were feeling a little bit more sexual, and more sexual than they had been feeling and like the last couple of years. And like it was just easy for them to be more present and to want to engage with their partner sexually, and to even want to initiate with their partner sexually. So I still see them from time to time. They were quite gridlocked in their sessions before they had their couple of ketamine sessions. But when I see them, they're like in this light, airy place. And like it's easy for them to get out of that gridlock. It's easy for them to um, like come to a solution and like be with each other more fully. So I don't know, like it's hard to explain. And I think even for my clients, like it's hard to explain like the shift, but they know that there is a shift, and they can feel the shift that's happened.
I think that's so amazing too that I know right now you're a PhD student. I'm sure there will be a lot of really great research and we'll see your name tied to it. Yes. Yes, in this field, and I think you're gonna be guiding so many other therapists to be able to implement strategies and therapy, especially in the BIPOC community. I just love that the work that you're doing, and how can people connect with you now in the meantime too, either for sessions or just to connect?
Yeah, so I am at Melanin Sex Therapy, like on all my socials. So I am on Facebook, Instagram. I got off Twitter, and I'm proud of myself. So I am at Melanin Sex Therapy on those two platforms. And yeah, just go to my website, melaninsextherapy.com, and reach out to me if you are not in the state of Texas. Like I do coaching as well. So I can do coaching sessions with people. I do, like you mentioned, I do somatic sex education. So like that's more so like body work and like coaching. So I can do that with people who don't live in Texas. But yeah, I'm Melanin Sex Therapy everywhere.
Great. Well, thank you so much for giving us an intro into this. I feel like there are still many questions in my little my journal that I wanted to ask and just chat about. So I hope we stay connected. But in the meantime, everyone listening, feel free to connect too. And thank you so much for being a part of our wellness journey.
Thank you so much.